You're watching The Breakfast Club.
All right, morning, everybody. It's DJ NV Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God. We are The Breakfast Club. Let's bring some positivity into the room.
Hey, thank you for praying for Tekashi 69 too, Pastor.
6'9".
6'9".
Yes.
My honor.
Now we have Pastor Brian Houston. Brian Houston?
Houston, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Who is Brian Houston?
Well, when I woke up this morning, it was still me. So I'm an Australian pastor, lead a church called Hillsong.
Yes.
Which is kind of global, and I think you, Charlamagne, may know Carl Lentz.
That's
who's
my
a New
guy.
York pastor here.
Love him.
Love to write books, love to help people, love to do everything we can to see people fulfill their potential, which is what this book, There Is More, is all about.
There is more. And you talk about actually the early beginnings of starting your church as well, and actually living as you did, live up to your potential.
Yeah.
You know, and having what did you say you guys started with, just less than 100 people?
Yeah. At church, the very first time we got together, we had 70 people, 70. But the next week we only had 65, and the third week 53, and the fourth week 45. And it worked out there's only 4.5 more weeks and there'd be no more people.
Wow.
Do y'all have an actual?
Down so
It was
quick.
going down.
Do y'all have a building in Australia?
Yeah,
Actual
yeah.
church?
Yeah, we got multi-campuses.
Okay.
Buildings.
Because in America there
Whole
isn't
big
one.
Deal. Pardon?
In America they have no Hillsong. There's no actual Hillsong church.
Yeah.
So everybody always wonders, why doesn't Hillsong have a church?
Yeah, well, it's not easy in Manhattan. We're believing for it. We believe in miracles, but yeah, when you're downtown LA and in Manhattan, it's not easy to find buildings.
Got you.
Now I'm confused. Now, how does the church work? Do you go from church to church or areas to areas speaking God? Like, how does that work? You just rent out venues? Is it like a club? You just rent out a spot and then you get people to come? How does it work?
We use a lot of nightclubs and clubs for venues, but in my own role, I'm the senior pastor, so my wife and I started the church 35 years ago, so my role is kind of broad and global and looking after it all, but we've got key people, phenomenal people really, young pastors, young leaders all around the world, and they're doing an amazing job. We reach a lot of young people, so that's maybe different than most demographic as well for church, and sing contemporary songs, contemporary worship, live songs.
Put out albums.
Ultimately, we do everything we can to help people to connect with Jesus.
I'm seeing more young people getting back to the church, which is a great thing.
Yeah, it's
Are you seeing
working against the
that
trend
as well?
Yeah, well, it's working against the trend. I mean, people think that church is getting older, more boring, more irrelevant, and empty, and it's amazing to see the opposite happening. Church is young, it's dynamic, it's packed out, and so it's great.
Why do you think that's happening? I'm sorry. Why do you think that's happening?
I think a lot. Well, firstly, I think that people do have a search for spirituality, something more in life, whether they admit it or not. I think a lot of people are just very empty, and they think there's got to be more to life than this. And so, from that, I think that people start looking for answers. And if we can connect with people, if we can present the gospel in a way that really connects with people where they're at right now, then I feel like we can reach a lot of younger people, and that's exactly what's happening. And not just in one culture either, from Ukraine all the way through to Barcelona or Madrid and Spain, and obviously here in New York City, USA, Australia. It seems like it's working everywhere, reaching younger people.
Now, in the book, you talk about being spiritually dead or spiritually alive. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I just believe that God has so much more for us. And in that chapter, I talk about exploring the depths. I talk about a movie, The Shadows, and in The Shallows, in that movie, there's a girl attacked by a shark in a deserted beach, and so she's wounded, injured, hanging onto a rock for her life, and it's an imagery to me of the way some people live their lives. You know, they're sort of on the surface of things, maybe hurt and just holding on to dear life, and so I'm encouraging people to dive into the depths from a scripture reference. I can't think of the very reference right now. Dive into the depth of all that God's got for you. There's so much there. When you swim in the ocean, you swim above the Great Barrier Reef. In Australia, look, you've got no idea of what's under you. But if you dive down, there is just so much colour, so much wonder, so much splendour. And I think spiritually speaking, it's the same. I think God's got so much more for us. And sometimes because we're just living our lives on the surface and not diving into the depths of all that God's got, that we can be missing out. So you can be living spiritually alive, which is an incredible way to live, or spiritually dead.
What I love is that we can go to church online right now too.
Yeah.
A lot
Bedside
of times,
Baptist.
yeah.
That's what we call it.
Right.
So,
Bedside
Baptist.
I haven't heard that before. Bedside.
but sometimes I feel a little guilty. Like, am I wrong that I'm not actually going to church, but I'm watching it online? You know, it feels like I'm supposed to be there.
Well, I'm a church pastor, so I love seeing people get to church because of the whole community side of it. You know, there's an element of faith in the room when people gather together, but better online than not at all.
Right. That's a fact. Now, you also talk about dreams and dream killers in this book, and how we have to have dreams because some of us don't aspire high enough. So let's talk about the dream killers that are out there, because I think we experience those people all the time.
Yeah, man, you sure do. Obviously, Joseph in the Bible, he had a dream, and then God gave him another dream, and his brothers were very threatened by his dream and literally beat him up, left him for dead, and were dream killers. And then prison tried to kill his dream, and all sorts of things tried to kill his dream. And I think for us as well, I believe there is a devil, and he hates God's purpose in a person's life. And I just love seeing people dream big dreams, huge dreams. And we should never be surprised, though, when either life itself or various challenges or the negative words of other people try to kill our dreams. And I'm encouraging people in the book, there is more, that, you know, when the world says you can't, God says you can.
Did you have dream killers in your own personal life?
Absolutely. In fact, there's still there'd be voices and various things that would try to get me to step back and walk back from my dream. But by God's grace, we're still pursuing that dream and still seeing it go beyond what we could ever have imagined, exceeding abundant and above anything we could ever imagine.
You think trolls are going to hell?
Who?
Trolls.
Like internet
Social
trolls.
media.
No, social media trolls.
yeah.
People that make up fake
No.
pages to try to hurt people, or, you know, causes people to have suicide sometimes. You
Yeah,
think all
no.
of them going to hell?
Well, I think it's horrible, the way people behave on the internet, trolls, and I enjoy blocking them. It's an adrenaline rush, blocking trolls and
Why
so
not just
on.
give it to God?
Pardon?
Why not just give it to God?
Oh yeah, but I do that as well. But,
Yeah.
but look, I can't comment on this person is going to hell. This one's not, unless I know those people, and even then, that's God's job. That's God's work. But I do think trolls are a very negative force, and like you say, can, for young people, cause suicide and depression, and so it's not exactly the kind of Christ-like behavior that's going to take you to heaven.
Can you explain the concept of appointment and disappointment?
Yeah, I can. I believe everyone, God's got a call on their life, that they've got a God-given appointment, and disappointment is to go in the other direction. So appear or disappear, this takes it in the other direction. So God's got appointment for us, and the devil again would love to disappoint us, get us off that appointment, get us. And so we all know disappointment is part of life. We can have disappointments and relationally, disappointments when something we were hoping for, dreaming for, believing for. And so I guess in the book, I'm just really wanting people to not allow disappointment to get them off track with God's call for their life, God's appointment for their life.
What do you think when people say that they're spiritual but not religious?
Yeah, I actually agree. You know, religion and spiritual is a different thing, but I think there's another level again. So you can sort of be spiritual and believe in all sorts of things, and it can be fairly nebulous. Religion to me is dead. It's just, it's form. It's form. Whereas spiritual, it's, people have a belief, but maybe don't know what that is. And so to me, to be a believer in Jesus Christ is a different level altogether. So it's more than spiritual. It's a connection and relationship with Christ.
You know, when we Googled and did homework on you, like we always do for all our guests, we seen something pop up about your dad. What happened with your father? And it was a sexual assault?
He was accused of sexually assaulting children, and people got upset because they said that you failed to report it.
Yeah, which we can talk about that because I definitely reported it. Yeah, look, it was hell. When I was in my 40s, I'm 64 now. When I was 45, I got a call into our church office making an accusation that my father had abused a boy many, many years before that, back in the 1970s. And so obviously that wasn't my finest day. And I confronted my father, and he agreed that that had happened. And so we fired him, and, that was into his ministry.
What's your relationship with him now, your dad?
He's dead. He passed away.
Oh.
Yeah, but it was a very hurtful, very painful time. And even just 4 years ago, 2014, they have in Australia what they call a Royal Commission. So it's like a government commission into abuse in all the churches and all the institutions, so even like Boy Scouts and so on. And so I had to appear before that Royal Commission. And in Australia, firstly, there's no statutes of limitation on sexual crime. So, and then secondly, you've got to if you are aware that someone commits a crime that's in my state where I live, someone commits a crime that's punishable by more than 5 years in prison, you have to report that crime. And so the situation was the victim, in this instance, he was pleading, don't go to the police, don't go to the police, don't go to the police. And so I went to our church board. I went to actually the church board of the church my father had pastored at, because all these things had happened long before Hillsong Church even started, and made announcements to the church. And so it was out there, it was public. The one thing I didn't do, though,
Let's go to the police.
was go to the police. Funny thing is, there was probably at least 12 to 20 people who knew about it before me, and none of them went to the police either. So, yeah, so that's obviously a mistake we made, but...
Were you trying to protect them at all?
Protect my father?
Yeah.
No, I knew I couldn't do that. One thing I never, ever did was try to protect him. I always talked about it publicly, because I felt that's what I needed to do. That's what I had to do. And so if the guy, by the way, the guy who my father abused, when I found out, he was 37 years old. He wasn't 12.
Right.
If he had been 12, I will guarantee you, we would have gone straight to the police and we would have reported him if he was still a minor, if he was still. But, he's 37. And my attitude was, if he wants to go to the police, he can go to the police. We sure never stopped him or tried to stop him from going to the police. But it was a hell of a time. And
Your dad never sexually assaulted you, though?
Pardon?
Your dad
No, he
never
never did. He never did. Not my brother, not my sisters. No. In fact, the dad I knew.
What? What? That's a valid question. What?
Yeah, I don't mind the question. I don't mind the question at all.
What's wrong?
This guy's so crazy, man. Was it hard rebuilding the trust in the church after that?
Well, miraculously, the church didn't really stumble. The church just kept going forward. That's the miracle of it. You got to remember again that these things happened before our church, Hillsong Church, even existed. So, but the church has been incredible. They've just stuck with Bobby and I and come on the journey. And I think if we had have tried to cover it up, if we had have actually behaved a different way, it would have caused massive problems for the church.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said there's no statute of limitations in Australia, because I'm sitting there thinking about, like, damn, I wonder how that would affect things here in America. But even on a spiritual level, what is the statute of limitations on forgiveness?
What are the statutes?
On forgiveness.
Yeah.
Can you ever forgive somebody for that kind of crime? Because, here...
Are you talking about him, or are you talking about
Or
God?
just in
or you talking
general,
about people?
like,
It's
because here, if somebody's accused of sexual assault, sexual harassment, rape, whether we don't even know if they really did it or not, just the allegations, we banish them, especially now you're done. So how do you forgive somebody in that situation?
So a perpetrator, someone who commits crime. Yeah, well, I guess that's a challenge, isn't it? And especially if the crime was committed against someone that you love or someone that you care about. But
I mean, a perfect example. Did you forgive your dad?
Yeah, well, I think I forgave my dad. Yeah,
When he was alive?
my relationship with him was never the same again. He only lived another 5 years, and he was depressed, and he was out of it. And I'd still go up and see him and so on. But now it's been 20 years plus since this happened, and I guess as time's gone on, I probably in some ways have got angrier with him, not the other way around. But he, I think I forgave him, but it was a tremendous. I mean, it's like my hero. Finding out my hero's actually a villain.
Right. How did the church take you after? Were they understanding? Did they feel like, did they separate the two, or was it one of those things like, oh, you're his son, so it's this, that, and the other? Because I know how cruel people could be.
Yeah, inside our church, look, people have been incredible. And they've stood beside my wife Bobby and I, and they've stood with us all the way. And I think people saw me, like even publicly, like, you know, a couple of times I had massive media scrums. You know, as that guy the media was chasing down the road and so on. But I would stop and talk to them. So I was trying to be as open as I can. And I think that really worked for me. I think at the end, you know, I gained quite a bit of respect in a lot of people's eyes. Because we didn't run from it, you know, because we did front up to it.
Can you explain what is the walk in the war?
Yeah, well, to me, the Bible talks about, you know, our spiritual fight. We fight not against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. Yeah. And so that's, to me, the war. And the walk is your everyday life. And there's a scripture that says, even though we walk in the flesh, we don't war in the flesh. And so what I'm talking about in this book is people being good at both. Some people are great at the war. In other words, they're first to the prayer meeting, they are front row church, and they tithe, and they're great at the spiritual side, but they're pretty well hopeless when it comes to the walk, which is the discipline and the everyday living, the things that help us to get our life in order. But when people are good at the walk and the war, they know how to go to the heavenlies, they know how to fight spiritual battles, but they also know how to hold their own life together. That's when we start fulfilling our potential.
You also talk about fulfilling your God-given potential in this book. How do you know what your God-given potential is? Is there a point, like, how did you know? And how does the average person know, like, okay, this is my God-given potential, and I need to take this to the next step to fulfill what I'm supposed to be doing? Yeah,
it's a great question, and I don't think you do know what your full potential is. For number one, that book's based on Ephesians 3:20, but it says God is able to do anything, you know, far more than you could ever imagine or guess or request in your wildest dreams. And so we don't really understand our potential, but I believe that when we cooperate with the Holy Spirit, that our potential is so much higher than what we think it actually is. So a big part of the reason I wrote that book was to point people to the potential they have, get them believing that it could be beyond anything they could imagine in their wildest dreams, because so much in life, again, dream killers is trying to knock that kind of faith and that kind of belief out of people. But potential is something that I believe in. I think all of us have got potential, and if you just take note of the way God's gifted you. I mean, we've got certain gifts, we've got certain talents, and I personally don't think that God's schizophrenic. He doesn't make you one way to use you a different way. So you want to know what your potential is, look at your gifting, look at your talent, look at what flows naturally for you, and keep pursuing that. And
how did you know when did you know what your God-given potential was that you had to fulfill?
Yeah, well, I don't know that I actually knew what my potential was. What I did know was that I felt, even as a kid, called to serve God, one day build a great church and help people and reach people. And so in that sense, I knew what my potential was. But what it would look like, our world today is like crazy, exceeding abundant and above anything I could have ever asked or thought. Crazy in the sense it's global, it's big, and we've got television channels, worship music, a college, and just so many other things over and above. And then we've got campuses and churches in many countries around the world. Well, I didn't see all that when I started thinking about potential. All I saw was something in my heart that was a dream that I started stepping into.
And then we have to take it to the next level and keep on building on that, because I think sometimes people kind of coast as well. Like they have an ability to do something, they get up, they do it every day, but they never do try to take it to the next level.
Yeah, I guess that's where the hunger comes into it. How hungry are you?
Honestly, I don't think that, like, when you're blessed with talents and you're blessed with abilities, I don't think it's about what you can accumulate. I think it's more about, using those things to serve others. I feel like that's your true purpose in life, service to others.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because this book, there is more. The one thing it's not about is just more stuff or more things or more money. It's all about the incredible adventure of the will of God and living on that adventure. And that's how I see it. It's an adventure, and like any adventure, you've got your highs and your lows and your tough moments and your good moments. And so it's a book about potential for sure, and just believing for more of what God has for us. There's one line in there says that the more is less about us, more about others, and all about God.
What do you think about all the pastors? I see this a lot, and I ask a lot of pastors that come up here. You see pastors, with their private jets and, these reality shows now and television, and it seems more of a servant call and more of a business.
Yeah, well, I don't have a private jet.
Not yet, anyway. You can't get a private jet before Hillsong get a building in America, though.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, look, I try not to judge others too much. I think sometimes people are unwise in the way that they go about having a private jet.
Yeah, that's why I think people are against church sometimes, because
Yeah.
they feel like their offerings and their money and their stuff is just towards a business and not to the actual call.
Yeah. Yeah, and that danger is there, and there's no doubt about it. There have been excesses in some areas of church life, and I don't think it does, the message of Jesus much good, that's for sure.
Right.
So all I can do is be accountable for myself and hopefully keep it all in good order, good balance.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about churches getting involved locally, like with what's going on, say, police brutality, politics, anything like that? You think that's something, especially politics, that should be kind of strayed away from in church?
Yeah, the politics one is interesting, because sometimes you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. In other words, if you're not saying anything, you get in trouble because you're too weak to say anything. But then if you're saying something, you're taking sides and you're alienating people, and you sort of get caught in the middle. But I think the church has a voice. That on many instances, we have, we've got a voice. We've got something to say, and I feel at the right time, at the right place, it's a good thing for people to take a stance, especially not so much on politics, like Republican or
but right or wrong.
Yeah, but what's right or what's wrong? So police brutality, absolutely. We should be standing up and saying something. People being hurt or abused in any way, we should be standing up and saying something. So we have a voice in the society just like everyone else does.
Okay.
I look forward to reading this book. I know Taylor took my book, so I'm definitely going to look at it. And we appreciate you for joning us, and thank you for praying for Tekashi.
Yes,
Now.
please,
you.
thank you for praying. Did you feel any
Thanks for the
energy from
honor.
him at all? Did you feel anything?
No, but I felt like he was very open. I felt like he was genuine when we prayed for him.
He tried to walk
which
out.
is great.
At first, yeah, he did. But we appreciate you for joining us. It's Pastor Brian Houston, and it's The Breakfast Club. Good morning.